Welcome to Beyond the Bee, an ongoing dialogue about the past, present, and future of the B Corp movement. Co-hosts Emmy Allison and Ryan Honeyman facilitate an open and honest conversation about the B Corp movement, advise companies on how to increase their impact, and provide a deep dive into the new B Corp standards that are shaping our community.
Hey everyone, I'm Ryan Honeyman, a partner at Lift Economy, and I'm joined once again by my co-host, Emmy Allison. Emmy, welcome back.
Hi.
So we are back, and if you haven't already seen the news, the new standards are here.
Fireworks. Cue all the sound effects that we don't have.
Yeah. This is the low budget podcast here, people. We don't have sound effects.
We're honking horns. There's foghorns, all kinds of horns.
Yeah, and I think it's worth noting, Emmy and I are tired because we've been trying to read these standards a lot and make sense of them. We're recording this on April 9th, so it's like 24 hours after the standards dropped. And there's a lot to sift through. The new standards are contained in a 1,130-page PDF. Amy, what percentage of that PDF have you been able to make it through so far?
I think I made it, when I was scrolling, I made it through, oh gosh, all the orders are so weird from document to document, but I made it through human rights, which is the first one.
There you go. Yeah. And Emmy was also looking at it on her phone, which is just for added complexity.
Do not recommend.
We were joking before we started recording this that the carbon footprint of the B Corp community has probably gone up because of all the artificial intelligence requests to review this document and summarize it. So I think what we're going to do today, so there's so much to cover with the new standards. We have a full roadmap of episodes planned out. We're basically going to spend today's episode on what's changed. So what's new since the draft standards were released in 2024? What's the same? What's different with the new standards? And we'll talk about anything big that stands out to us. And then we're going to take some time in upcoming episodes to really drill down into each impact area. So you'll have at least 7, if not more, episodes really getting into the nitty-gritty of the new standards. Amy, anything to add on that?
No, but I will just say that the new standards getting released is it feels like it should be the end of a very long marathon, but it's also kind of just like a little bit the middle. And you're just like, wow, this has been happening for 4 years. It truly is incredible, the process that B Lab has conducted and pulled off over the past several years. It's been quite the undertaking to get so many feedback data points from all different parts of the community and all different parts of communities around the world. And we've been waiting for these standards for so long. And there's been so much uncertainty within the community about how best to prepare and whether there would be enough support and resources and time to prepare. It's definitely a momentous milestone. It's definitely something that I really want to fully celebrate. And also at the same time, I'm like, wow, we have so much work to do.
Yeah.
On the whole, though, I am really excited for these standards. I really do think that they are helping us to really, truly move the needle toward an economic system that is truly for the benefit of all life. There are going to be some growing pains in this process, and we've already had some, but I'm really excited at the sort of collective impact that we'll be able to measure across the entire B Corp community because of these standards. So I am excited.
Yeah, I imagine there's a lot of people at B Lab who've been working super hard behind the scenes, who have rings around their eyes. And this is a massive undertaking. So we can jump into this question. What stood out to you? We're not going to get into the details of every topic, but big things that stood out. I do want to say, and this was partly in the draft standards and has been fleshed out, but just the amount of cross links and sublinks, and you can go to any question and have a ton of resources linked under each question that can really help you with implementation. So I just imagine it's hard to fathom all the work that went into this.
It is quite a comprehensive set of standards. And yeah, when you think about it from like a resource standpoint, it was an incredible library of resources for enabling businesses to be a force for good. The standards alone, without them being implemented or applied, are just truly incredible. But I also look forward to folks being able to sort of show their work as well.
Like some PhD should be awarded. This is like dissertation level to folks at B Lab.
Everyone who worked on the standards, yes, should get an automatic PhD. Love.
Okay, well, so big things that stood out. Why don't you jump in? What were some of the big things that stood out to you once you started to process this?
Yeah, I did just want to clarify the last time we talked about new standards, we were talking about some of the deadlines for recertification for the B Corp community. And just to reiterate, folks who have recert dates in 2025 are eligible to submit on version 6 if they submit by June 30th. If their standard approach, something like small and medium enterprise. But I did just want to clarify, because it wasn't super clear to me, that most folks, from what it seems like, and again, you have to double check with your global partner region, but for US and Canada, again, standard approach, small, medium enterprises, if you have a recert date in 2026, so disregarding the submission dates, but your recert date is January 1 through December 31st, 2026. Apparently, B Lab is issuing 1-year extensions if you would like to choose. From what I understand, because it's difficult to parse through the B Lab terminology, if you have a recertification date on, say, March 3rd, 2026, I believe you have until March 3rd, 2027 to submit on the new standards, which is very helpful because everyone knows we need at least 1 year to prepare for recert, and then ideally longer for new standards. So there is going to be a little bit of a phased in approach. It sounds like there will not be any recerts accepted for the most part. Again, check with your global partner region in the second half of 2025. But yes, the US-Canada team created a little recert tool that helps you when you plug in your demographics, your industry sector, and size. It will spit out what your like recert like guidelines are. So check that out.
Do we have a link for that? We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, I'll find the link for that.
We'll get the link. We'll get the link to everyone. We can't just drop a cool tool and then be like, hope you find it. Peace.
Truly.
We did not know this. This was not clear to us until today or yesterday, that if you're a B Corp with a recert date between 1st of January and 31st December 2026, and transition to the new standards, you'll receive a 12-month extension to their recertification due date. Yeah, that's probably to cover, I'm imagining, a few things. One is it increases the likelihood that people will be ready to recertify. So that's good. And I imagine it gives B Lab time, because they have to wind down basically all these of analysts who are helping companies on version 6 recertify. And so it probably gives them a little more space to, because for a while they're going to be certifying on 2 different timelines or 2 different set of standards, and that's going to be really hard for them. So yeah, that's a good thing.
Yes. And for folks who do have those, who are first to recertify on the new standards, it's helpful to know that the formerly B Impact app, new B Impact platform, I kind of want to call it the Beep, is live with the new...
You heard it here first, folks. The Beep.
The Beep. It's live with the new standards. And so if you go in there and you see you have your company profile in there. When I go in there, I see like 100. But you see your company profile, and when you log into your, again, B Impact platform, no longer B Impact app.
The BIP.
The beep. I think when you navigate there, you land at your dashboard, and then there's like a couple rows of boxes, and the second row of boxes says, get ready for the new standards with an exclamation point. And then there's a button that says get started. That's how you can open up or access the new standards. And so you should be able to look at those now. They're custom already to your company's demographics, the size, the revenue, the sector, the industry. That's how you can see your specific standards.
Love it. Yeah. And one thing that stood out to me about using the B Impact platform, the BIP, or was saying BIP or beep?
I love
The beep sounds more funny.
The beep is so fun. If you pronounce it with a Spanish accent, then it's beep.
Oh, last beep. One thing I like about the B Impact platform, the beep, is that you can mention people. So one of the things that past clients have been annoyed with is they're like, why isn't this like Asana or like Google Docs or like other tools where you can mention people? And you can now. So in this platform, you can type, the name of somebody, you can assign it. So it's got like, you can assign it to someone. It's got a due date. It's almost like Sauna in a way, if anyone's used it. But you can type a comment and you can mention people. So there's some cool functionality that stood out to me as a lot different than the other version of the assessment, which was more just random commenting, and hopefully people found their name next to a comment or something like that. So that stood out. Anything else about like sort of interface that stood out to you, Emmy?
Yeah, I will just say that it's quite aesthetically pleasing. It's like very beautiful to me. I mean, this is my opinion, right? I find it really pretty, and I know that there are a lot of people that worked really hard on the interface, the user interface. It is a little bit awkward when I resize my window sometimes, but it's really beautiful as far as like the presentation of standards go. And so I just wanted to say that. Have you figured out what happens when you assign someone? Like, where does it show
No,
up?
I did, but I tried it. I tried to assign myself,
Okay.
and then I pressed comment or whatever, and then I checked my email, no emails, and then I checked the notification center in the app, no notification. But maybe it's because I assigned myself. So we'll continue to play with that.
Yes.
And let you all know.
Yes. And I also will say that I heard that we will be able to pull these down into a spreadsheet, but don't hold me to that. Or if you want to request it, then request it. But
yeah,
I will say that depending on how the user interface allows us to organize this information, like due dates and assigned people and all that jazz, it still might be nice to be able to pull it off the platform.
Yeah.
To collaborate with your team.
Another thing that stood out to me was impact business models or lack thereof. For many B Corps, not all, but many, the only way that they could get above 80 points was through impact business models. And so these are things like, do you have a workforce development program that hires formerly incarcerated folks? Or do you have, a product that has less environmental impact than market alternatives, like it's 100% organic or regenerative organic? And they don't actually have that in the new standards. Partly, B Lab says because of the implications of emerging regulations, their effects on the content and implementation of the standards, and limited resources to support a quick transition. And I get it, right? Because part of the move to this new standards platform is to say every B Corp meets these basic requirements. You cannot just score super high in one or two sections and super poorly in others. So the impact business models, which could really help you in an 80-point choose your own adventure model, are potentially it's a little less relevant because you still want to have everyone meet the baseline standard. So B Lab is not saying they're not going to have impact business models. They're just saying that it hasn't happened yet just because of the need to like prioritize other things. Do you have any take on that, Emmy?
I think originally the hope was that IBMs could create some flexibility as it relates to specific, the related impact topics in the new standards. And I don't think that we were sort of thinking about it as a shortcut. It's just like, oh, some IBMs are covering, like, if you have demonstrated and you've proven this in the past, then you've already achieved like XYZ in the specific impact topics. But it seems like it was difficult to incorporate and integrate. And then especially there's quite a bit of reference in the language of the new standards and the framing of the new standards to the EU, like empowering consumer directives and certification regulations and certification schemes. And so I think at the end of the day, IBMs, as B Lab defines them, is something like unique and extraordinary business models or something like that. And I think in this scenario, it was a little too unique and too extraordinary. And so it wasn't quite jiving, but I am looking forward to seeing how they get integrated. It is a bit frustrating for folks who have been working on these for many years now, but I do think that they will translate in some ways across the impact assessment.
Let's move to some other stuff that we found to stand out. I think one thing that stood out to me, which we did an episode on, I think in December, called Can Your Clients Jeopardize Your B Corp Certification? This is about material involvement in industries that undermine B Lab's theory of change. So, for example, they added revenue and value chain thresholds to define what material involvement in those industries is. For example, like fossil fuel and weapons. And so you'll have to look to see what they are. I think 1% or more of revenue for some is the cutoff for some of these industries. So I recommend checking out the B Impact platform, the new standards, to get the exact levels. Any thoughts on that, Amy?
It's interesting. I think they lowered the threshold from the last draft standards. I think it was something more like 5%, and now it's the company generates less than 1% of annual revenue from stakeholders of the listed industries. But yeah, I think that's a helpful thing to make sure folks are compliant on.
One thing in the government affairs and collective action, there's a new requirement on responsible lobbying policy. I think this is dependent on your size of your company, but there is, for some companies, going to be responsible lobbying. And then this is actually a really big one. So this is for companies in the XXL category. You have to publicly report your country by country tax information, disclosing revenues, profits, and taxes paid in each jurisdiction, which is going to be very uncomfortable for a lot of very large B Corps, because the B Corp movement really wants to make sure large multinationals in particular are not engaging in aggressive tax avoidance and are transparent where they pay taxes. And this change was probably influenced by feedback that tax behavior is a key part of a company's societal impact. So it sets a really high bar for large multinationals, one that could be controversial, as many companies do not currently publish such detailed tax data. Any thoughts on that, Emmy?
Yeah, I do think it's interesting. A lot of companies, especially American companies, get really sensitive about this kind of stuff. But I do think it's interesting that they're limiting it to extra, extra large companies. And I'm wondering if this is something they might like just kind of maybe slowly fade in or phase in over time. But this feels like such a fundamental part of the transparency of what corporations do with their time and resources. I know that there are like countries out there that require their companies to publish their financial statements, and it's just like a way of life and a part of life. And so it's interesting that it's limited to extra, extra large companies, but I would imagine there are quite a few companies out there that are sighing a sigh of relief that is limited to extra, extra large.
Yeah. Another big change, well, big change. We knew that this was not going to last in the last version of the draft standards, which is in the previous version, they had something around companies are required to pay a family living wage. And it was just really hard for a lot of companies, including some of the most well-known companies in the B Corp movement who actually pay pretty well, but it's just a family living wage is actually a pretty high wage. And we should aspire to that, but it was also just financially impossible for a lot of companies. So B Lab had to go back to the drawing board and they reframed living wage and collective bargaining as ideal approaches while increasing flexibility for companies unable to pay a living wage. They realized that this flexibility is needed because living wage benchmarks around the globe are not uniform, and the barriers to increasing wages are often outside a company's control. So in the new standards, all companies with workers must at least work towards a living wage or pay collectively bargained wage. And if they can't, there's other actions that they can complete, such as publicly sharing their high to low pay ratio, providing universal childcare, joining collective action on wages, etc. What's your take, Emmy?
Yeah, I am interested in actually reading this one, and the way that this sub-requirement is laid out is it's Fair Work 2.8. The company implements fair wage practices for its lowest paid employees. It specifically calls out. And then FW 2.8 has like quite a few options underneath. There's 2.8A, 2.8B type situation. But 2.8.1 is the company chooses and implements one of the following. The first is the company pays employees a living wage. The second is the company pays employees a collectively bargained wage. And the third is the company calculates its living wage gap, creates a closure plan, and meets 2 or 3 additional criteria. And I think it depends on the size as well. And one of those additional criteria is like you disclose the high to low pay ratio. I know that there was just so much time, effort, and honestly, love that went into this sub requirement. Paying a living wage is such an important tool for making sure that folks have what they need in this world. And at the same time, there are quite a few businesses, I will say mostly American, in the developed world, American companies who really struggled with the infrastructure of our policy and our government and the way that our economy currently works, that they found, that family living wage to be really challenging, and it is really challenging. But I do think that this living wage standard still is quite rigorous.
Well, I think let's move to, there's a few sections that had updates, but we're not going to spend time on because they're not super material or, to be honest, super interesting for this first episode. And so we're going to move to climate action, which is actually the last section that had sort of a big update we wanted to share. One of the main things that feedback that B Lab got during their consultation since the draft standards were released is the challenge of meeting the climate action requirements for small companies. There's a few reasons for that. There's more legislation coming in to ensure the accuracy of environmental claims. So, SMEs were having to potentially disclose data or targets that are incomplete or unverified by third parties, which would be kind of burdensome for them. And smaller companies often lack the resources for accurate GHG measurement, which can hinder their ability to set robust science-based targets. So B Lab has decided that given the urgency of the climate crisis, it's more important for these smaller companies to focus on taking action now rather than diverting resources to precise emissions measurement tracking. So they're required to develop an action plan with measurable targets and implement actions that align their commitment with the Paris Agreement, even without precise GHG data. And then they're also required to publicly share their climate action plans and progress, ensuring that their efforts are credible and accountable to stakeholders. So this is for the climate action section, CA 2.1, CA 3.3, CA 3.6, just depends on the size and industry of your company. I'll admit that there's a part of me that's sad about not having the verified third-party verified science-based targets for like all the B Corps. And at the same time, I get it. right? Like it's hard to do. I don't know. Emmy, do you have thoughts on this?
Yeah, it is quite an undertaking, and I appreciate the framing of this shift because it is so helpful for people to be able to just start flexing their muscles in this. There's still so many folks, and it's a lot of smaller service, be like they're providing a service and they don't have like as much of a physical supply chain as other companies, but it is again quite an undertaking to measure your greenhouse gas emissions, and with the pressure of having to do it like extremely accurately, yeah, it adds too much pressure and creates too much of like a perfectionist environment, and people just gotta like jump in and try it and start doing it and start incorporating it into their annual activities to be able to, for us to all benefit from it.
Yeah. And I should note that science-based targets are still required for large companies and up. So you have to have science-based targets validated by Science-Based Targets Initiative or verified by an independent third party. And also large companies are required to engage the value chain as part of a just transition plan. So it's making sure workers and other stakeholders in their value chain are brought along on the climate transition plans. And so that's good to see that. Yeah. So it's easier for small to medium companies, and the large companies are still have some pretty strict requirements.
Yeah, and then just reiterating that the list of implementation resources is quite comprehensive. And then on top of that, I think there are some global partners who are really ramping up their education efforts and being able to really support, especially the smaller Bs and smaller companies, in being able to meet these requirements without it being too challenging. It might be a little bit time consuming, but it shouldn't be unapproachable.
Yeah. Well, I think, those were the main highlights we wanted to share. Those are the things that stood out to us initially. There's a ton more. There's literally 1,100 more pages to go through. And Emmy and I will be doing deep dives on all of that. So hopefully this was useful to folks. And, if you have questions, things don't make sense, you have particular requests about like things to go into on the new standards, we're quite happy to do that. So, email us at beyond@lifteconomy.com. Anything else to add, Emmy, before we end?
It might not sound like it, but I am really, truly so excited for these standards. They're here. I hope that everyone who has touched the standards, like whether it be B-Labbers who have been working on this start to finish, B-Labbers who have joined the process partway through or left the process partway through, the B Corps who participated in the surveys, there's like academics, there's government officials who have participated in this process. This really is a momentous occasion, and folks should really celebrate that these exist because they are the result of a vast amount of hours and time and effort, and again, honestly, love for people and planet.
All right, everyone. Well, thanks for listening, and we'll be back next time with more on the standards. Hey, Beyond the Bee listeners. If you're looking for even more inspiring conversations with leaders on the front lines of our movement towards just futures, be sure to subscribe to Next Economy Now, produced by the team at Lift Economy. Next Economy Now broadens the focus beyond the B Corp movement to highlight the leaders who are taking a regenerative, bioregional, democratic, equitable, racially just, and whole systems approach to creating the new economy. Check out our latest episodes at lifteconomy.com/podcast. You can subscribe to Next Economy Now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts.